Hi, welcome to my latest YouTube video and podcast. I am Rosenberg. Today's going to be a departure for me. Normally, right before I do a video, I think to myself, okay, what is it that I want to say that I haven't said before? More often than not, it has something to do with my human magnet syndrome book, my codependency revolution book, or my self-love recovery treatment program. And that is a lot of area to cover, very broad. And I've done a lot of videos. But I want to do something different. I want to be more topical. I want to talk more about mental health issues that I have a great deal of experience, personal and professional. So just a little background. I've been in the mental health field for around 37 years and master's degree at Boston University, and have had a whole lot of jobs in the mental health field before I wrote my very first book, The Human Magnet Syndrome. So as much as I love the material that I've been talking about, now I'd like to switch up a little bit. And I'm going to start it off by talking about a topic that is near and dear to my heart. Depression is a topic that I have personal experience, family experience, professional experience, educational experience. It is something that I know inside and out. I wish I didn't know it so much, actually. Because just for full disclosure, it runs in my family. I believe my great-grandfather suffered from it. My father certainly did. He was in and out of hospitals back in the day when they called them psychiatric hospitals or behavioral health institutes or programs. He was in and out of those probably for the last 20 years of his life on almost every other medicine that they had. And myself, it's something that I've struggled with and thankfully have found great relief from medicine and periodically some good psychotherapy. So it's a topic I think we need to talk more about because there's such a stigma on depression as it is just by the topic itself. Depression, sadness, loneliness. It sounds negative. And when people experience it, they lose a part of themselves. It's like the walls in their life shrink. It is like their resources that they thought they had diminish, shrink, get smaller. The people that they thought were there for them, they seem to get further away. It's a very, very strange and complicated mental health disorder because what happens is it impacts a part of our brain that regulates our mood. And that part of the brain that manifests a good mood can pretty accurately tell us how we're feeling at any time. But when we are depressed, whether it's for situational reasons, psychological reasons, environmental reasons, or something that is more biochemical, something like that, what runs in my family, major depression, where it doesn't matter what's going on in your life. If you're not taking the medicine, you're going to feel depressed. And the reason I believe this video is going to be really helpful, as well as the other videos that follow it, is because it is really difficult to figure out depression with a mind that is depressed. Now think about it. Most of us don't go to a psychiatrist, don't go to a psychotherapist. We don't even probably talk to our friends if we're not feeling good. We just kind of, get up every day and we kind of measure our mental health and we just go about our business. But if we're kind of down, whether it's mild depression or more severe depression, we have to use the brain, our brain, that is afflicted with depression, that is limited by depression, that is sometimes overwhelmed by depression. We have to use our thinking processes, our intellectual processes, our cognitive processes to figure out what the heck is going on. And when we're depressed, we don't see things realistically. Sometimes we see things too much. We get flooded by life's challenges, or we see things not enough. We diminish things. We shrink them. We distance ourselves from them. We numb ourselves from that, or maybe we disassociate. So let's talk about what is depression. First and foremost, let's define it as a mental health disorder, as I know, as most mental health psychotherapists are trained. It has a name. Major depression is the name. Now, just to be clear, there's no such thing as a diagnosis of moderate depression or mild depression. Major depression is a form of depression that is debilitating. And I'll talk more about it. And then the other diagnosis that we use for depression is called dysthymic disorder. And there's variations of that, as well as there are variations of major depression. But I will talk about dysthymic disorder after I talk about major depression. But until then, the difference is one is debilitating. Major depression knocks you off your feet, makes it hard for you to cope with life. It makes everything more difficult. And although you might be able to get on with your life, it's really hard. And if you don't get treatment for it, there is going to be what we call functional impairment. Something in your life is going to give some relationship in your life, or relationships in general are going to feel the pressure, the weight of the depression. Friends might worry, friends might be mad, friends might be frustrated, or you might have distanced yourself from friends and they don't have a chance to try to communicate. But it impacts every facet of your life. So major depression, in order to be diagnosed, there has to be the presence of the following symptoms. So let me be clear about the symptoms and how we diagnose. Just because we're depressed and we're struggling, it doesn't necessarily mean we have major depression disorder or major depressive disorder. And I do not want to undercut or diminish the difficulty or the pain of depression that is not at the point of a diagnosis. It can be really painful and difficult. But if we're going to delineate, put a line between what is diagnosable, clinically diagnosable depression, it is major depression. And the symptoms are feelings of despair, sadness, feelings of loneliness, emptiness, loss of interest in your work, your friendships, activities or hobbies, or things that brought you joy, fatigue, tiredness, lethargy. Everything is harder to do. You are tired. You can't get enough sleep. You want to sleep more. You go to bed early and you wake up later, and still you're not rested enough. You feel sluggish, and like I said, it feels harder to get everything done. Then there is too little sleep, where you can't sleep. You have insomnia. Your mind races in the evening, and that keeps you from this natural sleep cycle routine that you're used to, and falling asleep becomes virtually impossible. Waking up in the middle of the night, not being able to go back to sleep. Getting up early, not being able to go back to sleep. Insomnia is a symptom of major depression that can be debilitating by itself, because when we don't get enough sleep, it impacts our mental health in general. And for those who understand this, and some people joke and wish and tell me they wish they had this problem, too much sleep can be equally harmful because it'll impair our cognitive functionings, our thought processes, our judgment too. Changes in appetite, a loss of appetite where you're just not hungry, food doesn't taste the same. You don't really want to eat that much. You get filled easily. You lose weight and you don't have an explanation. You aren't wanting to be in a diet. You're not intending to cut your calories, but you're losing weight. What's paradoxical about weight loss is that some people enjoy that symptom. They enjoy the symptom of losing weight, but certainly not the pain and suffering because of it. Then the opposite, just like the sleep, too much, too little, then there's increased appetite, where you are eating more than you usually do. You're emotionally eating. You're eating to soothe yourself. You're eating portions that are generally so much larger than you normally have. You have weight gain. Your ability to discern how much to eat and when to stop seems to be impaired. And then we have attention problems. It's interesting because a lot of disorders have symptoms that are similar to other mental health symptoms. For example, major depression has problems with attention. Because of the depression and all its symptoms, we have problems paying attention. Well, we also have problems paying attention if we have ADHD, attention deficit hyperactive disorder. But the difference is the attention issue is just a symptom of a larger problem. It's not the problem itself. A person who has depression has a problem paying attention, keeping their focus. They easily are distracted. Sometimes they're just daydreaming. They're in another place. Now, it is not the same as ADHD, but it can look that way. Most people who don't know the person who is depressed think that that person is not interested. Take it personally. Get insulted. Relationships change. They grow apart. Another symptom of major depression is rumination, is this constant thinking and processing of issues and thoughts and problems and challenges. You cannot stop thinking. And more often than not, it is negative. You are seeing the glass half empty. You are being pessimistic. You see your life, your future in terms of diminishment, in terms of what you are losing, what is going away, what you can't hold on to anymore, what you want to have, but you can't keep it from disappearing. Your thoughts get fixated on what is going wrong and how bad it feels and how you want all that pain to go away, how you want all the problems that you believe you have, which could be real, or they could be imagined. And depression is that way because it impacts our judgment. And I'll get to that in a second. So rumination, it's the thinking and it's the circular reasoning. It's the impaired logic. It's jumping to conclusions that don't necessarily make sense if you were not depressed. It's overanalyzing everything with the hyper focus on negative outcomes. And then we have a lack of judgment, a loss of judgment, an impairment in judgment. And what I mean specifically with this term, it's our ability to make good decisions in real time in order to keep ourselves away from trouble, problems, mistakes, to maintain the quality of our life, whether it's work, our social life, or our personal life, is to think on the spot and not make mistakes that you normally would not make if you weren't depressed. People who are depressed make really bad decisions, bad judgment. They are negative, they're pessimistic, they see things like they're disappearing and they can't control it. They feel further and further away from solving problems that normally could. The problems that they had before they were depressed now are gargantuan. They're enormous that they can't get to them. So therefore, a person with major depression who has impaired judgment is going to make bad decisions, impaired decisions, or just decisions that aren't good enough or good enough to help them maintain a certain level of comfort and mental health. A symptom of depression is relationships start to be stressed. If someone is depressed, they feel that they're unable to put in the energy and the focus and the time in a relationship. It feels so challenging, so intensely difficult. They feel like no one will understand them. There's the pessimism and the judgment that they're going to be judged and they're going to be misunderstood. So some people with major depression, they cut their losses and they step away from friendships. Some terminate friendships. Some, because of bad judgment, say things or do things that upset others, and that person will terminate or distance themselves from a relationship. Because we can't blame other people who don't know of our depression or who aren't naturally sympathetic. I mean, consequences are consequences. If we do something that hurts someone else and that person is hurt, it's hard, almost impossible to ask someone to act as if it's okay just because we're depressed. Memory is often impaired with depression. Again, we're talking about attention. We need attention. We need to focus in order to have our short-term memories that go into long-term memories. That's how our brain works. Let me add, we have working memory. Working memory is kind of keeping everything in the here and now and just paying attention and organizing it in your mind. And then you have the short-term memory, the memories that you need to remember for tomorrow, next week. And then we have long-term memories. Well, if you cannot really focus and your mind is wandering, or you're hyper focused on negative outcomes, you're being pessimistic, you're just lost in your despair, it's going to be difficult to focus and therefore have short-term memories and long-term memories. We are going to get lost in our world. Some people get agitated, angry. They get kind of upset, uptight. Depression really brings a person down, and it makes them, I know I'm repeating myself, it makes them feel pessimistic and lost and lonely, even if they're not. It changes reality for us, even though we are mistaken. We can't sometimes get to the right perception that's going to give us an accurate understanding and then decision-making capabilities to do the right thing in our environment. And if we are tired because we're sleeping too much, sleeping too little, negative thinking, everything else, all the other symptoms that go with depression, hopelessness, despair, we are going to sometimes get mad and agitated and lose our temper. People that have anger problems, and let's say mild to moderate anger problems, well, they become much worse. In itself can be a big issue. Even though there's no justification for someone to be abusive or hurtful to others, and I'm not saying just because you're depressed, you get out of jail card. If you play Monopoly, you know what I mean. But if you have major depression, you're going to be prone to be frustrated, get angry, and sometimes attack people verbally, emotionally, and not realize, because of the lack of judgment and the lack of executive functioning and everything else that's missing, that you're making a mistake. You're hurting yourself more. You're digging a hole. Sometimes the opposite happens. We stuff the anger. We bury it. We disassociate from it. So if anger is outwards, it is propelled forwards at a person who is frustrating a situation that is difficult, whether it's real or imagined, we can do the same thing through the inverse and stuff, disconnect, become numb. We can ignore our friends. We can ignore our job. We can ignore our children. We can shut ourselves down and make ourselves believe, because of our judgment and how reality is kind of warped, make ourselves believe that's better, but won't know that we're actually hurting ourselves. So anger gets turned inside. Sometimes it's represented passive aggressively. Some people, just because of their personality and other traits and quirks, aren't good at expressing anger directly. Now, if you have major depression and you are such a person, well, there's a good chance that you're going to express your anger passive aggressively. In other words, it's going to come out and you're going to hurt people and then act as if you didn't really mean it. You weren't trying to hurt them. You were just joking. For many people with major depression, it affects their sex drive or their normal level of intimate comfort or motivation to pursue intimate pleasure. And this is not always the act of sex. This can be an emotional intimacy. This can be physical intimacy, affection. It could be just hanging out with someone and feeling that you love them. That intimacy that happens without words. People with major depression lose their interest in intimacy. They lose their interest in sex. And they're more comfortable, paradoxically speaking, being disconnected intimately and not feeling the pleasure and the support and the closeness by disconnecting and avoiding it. A loss of interest in things that once you brought great joy. There's a term for it. And gosh, this is a term I learned 40 years ago, 37 years ago when I was an intern, anhedonia. Sounds like a song or something, but it's just this loss of pleasure, loss of motivation to do things that bring pleasure, this like plain emptiness that kind of permeates your life. Perhaps the most serious symptom, and please listen if you have major depression or any forms of serious depression, is suicidal thoughts, suicidal ideations, thoughts that the pain is so immense, so big, so unfixable that you just want to give up and end it and kill yourself just to make the pain go away. When major depression is that severe, their thought processes shrink. They converge into this tiny space where all there is the thought of, I want the pain to go away. They can't think it through. They can't reason it through. They don't believe there's any help. And all they can do is hope for a solution that gets rid of the pain. And where they can only go to is the thought of killing themselves. If that should be you, you have to reach out for help. You have to talk. I'll never forget a book that I read by Edwin Schneidman called The Suicidal Mind. And the book was written based upon people's reactions to surviving a suicide attempt. Every chapter had the story of one person who was so depressed that they chose to kill themselves, and by accident, they survived. And all of them said the same thing, that their lives became smaller and smaller. Hope for solving the problem became less and less. Their power to get out of the problems that they believed, which some are accurate and some are not, was more and more diminished. They all said that if they were not so depressed and their mind was working, they would not have attempted suicide. All of them. They all talked about this almost psychotic-like thought process that leads us into a decision to kill ourselves. And that, my friend, is the most serious of all the symptoms. And should you be experiencing that, please get help. There's another side, there's another answer, and you might not see it or feel it, but it's there. And then there's depression that is not as severe, not as chronic, not as debilitating, but it's there, and it can be there every day. Life is difficult, but you find more ways to survive than feeling trapped and unable with major depression, and we call that dysthymic disorder. I'm going to do a video on dysthymic disorder another day, so it'll suffice to say it's really depression. It feels like depression, and it's really hard to deal with if you have dysthymic disorder. But you can cope with life stressors and keep moving forward in your life, whereas in major depression, sometimes the best you can do is to bury yourself in the covers and not get out of bed. You just want to stay there for days, sometimes weeks. So I'd like to end by saying there's hope. I've struggled with depression my whole adult life. It took me, I believe it wasn't until 20 years ago that I realized my dad passed it on to me. I had it too. It wasn't my life. Now, to be honest, I've had some struggles in my life before, enough to make me depressed. Absolutely. You can be depressed. Depression is a normal response to very difficult life stressors or events. Major depression is something else. And let me say that now. You could lose your mother. You can have a divorce. You could have a terrible argument with your child. You could lose your job. There are so many reasons to make someone depressed. And that is depression. That's real. But we are talking about a different type of depression. Major depression is bigger. It's harder. It's more difficult. I should say that people that have major depression, they describe it as physical pain. And it is. I would describe my major depression as I can feel it in my face and my whole abdomen. It is the most uncomfortable feeling. And it's hard to put your finger on it, but it's pain. So if you are struggling with depression, get help. Go see a professional. And I'm not talking about a coach. They're great for all sorts of things. I'm talking about a psychotherapist, a psychiatrist. Talk to your doctor. Talk to someone that can get you mental health treatment. Not that you're going to need medicine, but at very least, you'll get someone to talk to, be able to look beyond the blinders that have narrowed your life down into despair, loneliness, and hopelessness. I hope this video and podcast was helpful, and I hope that I've given you information that will help you know yourself more, help you know a friend, a loved one, or just understand how difficult depression can be for some others. So be well. Should you want my mental health services, I am a psychotherapist and I work with depression. I specialize in it, and I would love to help you. Just give us a call. Just shoot me an email at help@selfloverecovery.com or go to our website at selfloverecovery.com. All right, be well. And thanks for letting me into your life and giving you this information. Bye-bye.